Hi, I'm Jimmy Butler, and welcome to the Agile Digest, where we have right-sized topics covered in just minutes. Now, typically my digests are somewhere around 3 to 6 minutes, but what I'm going to do here is walk you through a full-blown presentation on why doing Agile is the wrong approach. It should be about 30 minutes. Enjoy. So before we get started, let me give you a little background on me as it pertains to this presentation. I am a PMI certified project management professional. I'm a PMI certified Agile certified practitioner, and I'm a certified Scrum Master through the Scrum Alliance. I have about 18 years of project management experience in web and software, but my last 7 years has been more specific in the federal contracting space, where I've focused on Agile transformation and moving toward product management mindsets in that Agile space. So at this point, you're probably scratching your head. I said I'm Agile certified, I'm an Agile practitioner, but I'm telling you that doing Agile is the wrong approach. And how does this make sense? Well, doing Agile does not necessarily equate to being Agile, and being Agile is our goal, and that's what we're going to explore here today. So the presupposition of the presentation is this. Many agree on the merits of Agile development, okay? So I'm not going to go a lot into selling you on Agile. However, there are common misconceptions about what doing Agile really means and what is necessary to successfully transform our approach to projects and product development. And that's what I want to attack here today. So I think this cartoon from Dilbert sums up the premise quite well. In the first couple of frames, he's selling the benefits of Agile, and then in that last frame, his boss is like, sure, go do Agile, but just do it inside of the traditional constraints. And that's the challenge every organization will initially face, and that's fine, so long as it doesn't persist. So there are definitely challenges to Agile transformation. Resistance is a big one. Sometimes there's this hardened mindset, like a PMP mentality, that it's just deeply rooted. It's what we know. And a lot of times I like to say that the PMP is the anti-Agile, because the mindset you need for Agile is now quite the opposite in many ways from what we learned in the PMP. And so because this doesn't fit in that box that we understand, we have this lack of understanding about Agile, lack of trust and lack of belief. And so we build this resistance. We also have the idea of management versus leadership. Now, management is typically a command and control type of structure, whether it's organizational structure or project management, and it's this top-down reporting and tasking and directing, decision-making, discipline, so on and so forth, where there's these tight controls around everything that's going on in the team performance. And I think that's generally derived from a lack of trust, and it's something that just doesn't really work out that well with Agile cultures. What we really want is leadership, and leadership is not a challenge to transformation, but the challenge is getting to servant leadership from a management perspective, where we now serve the needs of the team, and we're there to remove their obstacles, and we're enabling the team to self-direct and organize. We're more providing coaching and advising. Now the teams are accountable to each other. If there's team problems, the team resolves those issues, and so there's a trust that's involved to get the work done. And the other challenge is underestimating what's required. So we have a lack of commitment, and we have a do-it-yourself approach. Now, sure, the lack of a commitment can many times tie back to resistance, but there's also a lack of commitment in the sense that we're trying to do it ourselves. We think that it's not that hard to transform our organization and to do Agile. So we go to a few classes, read some books and some videos, and we try to do this on our own without really taking a focused effort and realizing the work that's involved. And so those are some of your challenges to Agile transformation. So let's get back to the title of this presentation and ask, well, how can doing Agile be the wrong approach? Well, Agile isn't just something we do. It's the way we go about what we do. It's the reason we do what we do. See, Agile is not a methodology or some framework. It's not a set of processes and practices. It's not the things you do. It's actually a philosophy. It's a set of values and principles upon which a mindset's developed, and everything else builds off of that. So there's no process, methodology, framework, or tool that will ever overcome the lack of an Agile mindset. You see, we get caught up in the doing of Agile that we don't become Agile, and that's what we want to get into here. So what we do matters, no doubt about it. You're going to start in Agile and you're going to start doing things. But why are you doing what you do? And do your practices align with Agile values? So you notice in this triangle that the practices sit at the top. This is your methodologies of Scrum and Kanban. This is your day-to-day doing Agile. And because it's at the top, it's a clear indication that it needs a strong foundation. And what is that foundation? Well, these are the values of the Agile Manifesto and the 12 principles of that manifesto. This is where you start to become Agile, and it becomes your mindset. It's that foundation for which all of the things you do build upon. So the question is how well established is your foundation? And does your mindset embody these values and principles? So where is your mindset? The image on the left is doing Agile, and the image on the right is being Agile. And you notice that the difference here is what? The blue mindset ring is in different places. In one sense, when you're new to Agile, certainly, your focus and your mind is more wrapped around the practices and processes that you're supposed to start doing and learning. And we all know from the previous slide that we need a foundation of values and principles to support what we do. But when we're newer, we're not likely to have a strong grasp of those values and principles just yet. And of course, as time goes on, assuming that we put focus in that area, that mindset ring should grow out and start to encompass all of that so that we're becoming Agile, that we are Agile, that everything we do is a result of the mindset that we have. The question here is where's your mindset? Chances are most of us are somewhere in between these two rings. But let's do a quick self-assessment and kind of gauge where we are. So let's see if any of these sound familiar. We need a common framework, common processes and tools, templates we all share. We need a detailed project plan and schedule. What % complete is that task? Where's my Gantt chart? Well, I don't have time for all these meetings. That's scope creep. We don't need to do everything they recommend, right? Like the Scrum frameworks. We don't need to document, right? Well, how many hours will this take? Success to me is delivering original scope on time and on budget. Well, just show me the final product, because again, I don't have time for all these meetings. I can't estimate until I know more details. I need more requirements. And we need the sign off on those detailed requirements before we can get started. And any of those sound familiar to you? Are those things maybe you say or the ways you think? Are they things you're hearing in your teams and in your management and throughout your organization? If they are, it's an indication of where your mindset currently is. These are the things that we say when our mindset circle is more tightly around just what we are trying to do and not necessarily around the values and the principles. So let's spend some time really talking about what those values are. So how do we expand our mindset around the values and principles? Well, it's going to have to start with really focusing on what we value, what Agile values. So if you've been exposed to any Agile training or talk before, you've most likely been exposed to the Agile Manifesto. Now, the manifesto is just 4 simple statements, but it really embodies all of the values and the foundation for which everything else is built. And so I want to spend a good bit of time over the next several slides doing a couple of things. I want to talk about the statement that's on the bottom. While there is value in the items on the right, we value the items on the left more. And so we have people can gloss over this and say, well, that sounds good, and they never really give it much mind. And other people might misconstrue what some things mean, like, hey, I don't need to document, right? Or there is no plan and anything goes, right? Well, none of that's true. Again, we value the things on the right, but we value the things on the left more. And so what I'll do over the next few slides is I'll do like one slide on what's it like when we value the item on the left. And then, well, what's it like if we put more focus in the item on the right? And we'll do a compare and contrast of what those mindsets are. And hopefully as we do that, you'll start to think about where you are personally, where your teams are, and see if I challenge any of the ways you're currently thinking. We value individuals and interactions over processes and tools because we understand that projects are completed by people, not processes and tools. So we take a people-first approach. We're looking at things from a team perspective. We want teams to be self-directed and organized and empowered to go off and take risks and solve problems. That builds courage to know that if they take a risk and they fail, there won't be finger pointing and there won't be blame. And so we can build this trust because we know that we're collaborating together to solve problems together. And so we take on a servant leadership mindset where, we're not directing and tasking and doing all that from a management perspective, but we're rather giving them what they need and removing obstacles so they can be responsive, so that they can chase after the value and be able to make the changes that are necessary. And we want to do this in a low-tech, high-touch fashion. So face-to-face communication is always preferred. That's the lowest tech, highest touch way of working together. And you build out from there. And so that's individuals and interactions over processes and tools. When our focus is processes and tools over individuals and interactions, well, now we think processes and tools solve our problems. We're probably coming at it from a command and control perspective where we want to standardize everything. And here's a one-size-fits-all top-down framework that we're pushing down and making everybody do the same thing. Sometimes the tools we choose to use drive the processes that we develop. And sometimes, and many times, the processes then dictate the things we do. Like, when do we communicate with people? Well, I don't know. What's the communications plan say? Versus individuals and interactions where we're always collaborating and we're talking on an as-needed basis, not on a prescribed basis. And so everything we do isn't always necessarily understood, and it's just what we do, and it becomes very prescribed. We value working software over comprehensive documentation. See, there's no value until something is done and delivered. And people use software, not documents. So now we want to be thinking about value. We're value driven. How can I get something of value, something usable, something that can be tested, used, and experienced into the hands of the user early and often? That's the idea of the minimum viable product, the MVP, or what's the earliest testable thing I can give to them. And so I'm going to be focusing on getting things to done because my measure of progress is completed software, things that actually work. And when I think in terms of what's the minimal workable product I can put out there that works, now I'm going to be building in a progressive fashion. I'm going to do what I know now to solve the problem, and I'm going to learn from it, and I'm going to progressively elaborate on those requirements and those needs. And as more information comes in, it's going to help me develop what I want. But it's always in the mind of producing working software before anything else. And so we have this idea of barely sufficient. Barely sufficient in the terms of what's the first simplest workable piece of software that can get out there without all the bells and whistles, and also in the terms of the comprehensive documentation. What's the minimal documentation I need to develop to convey what somebody needs to know in order to develop my product and to know what I developed? When our focus is comprehensive documentation over working software, I think we waste time speculating that could be used learning. Now we're looking at a waterfall mindset. We're documenting everything up front, detailed specifications. I need to know all the answers. I need to know what my end product's going to be in every detail so I can document it before I even start developing it. Then I get caught up in analysis paralysis because I'm trying to estimate and figure out and anticipate every single idea, and that's just impossible. And at the end of the day, it's anti-value because I'm not producing any working software. We value customer collaboration over contract negotiation because we recognize that there's a difference between being right and doing the right thing. So if we're going to collaborate with our customer, we're really in partnership. So the teams, development teams, the vendors, the client, it's a partnership. It's a collaboration with a value-driven focus. There's going to be frequent communication so that we can always do the right work. And there is definitely going to be trust involved here. We're going to welcome change because we're more concerned about doing the next right thing than we are about making sure that every letter of the contract's met, or every deliverables there, or worrying about who's right and who's wrong. We're right when we focus on the right work and we do it together. When our focus is contract negotiation over customer collaboration, I think we lack trust, and then we manage that through tightly controlled contracts. Now, we know that tightly controlled contracts are typically inflexible. they tend to have a start to end focus, right? We want to focus on how we get started, and we want to make sure the end deliverables are all just right. But then everything in between kind of gets ignored. So we don't have that collaboration that we're looking for. But we do have increased documentation because we have to cover ourselves and we have to prove ourselves because there's a lack of trust involved. It becomes more about checking the box of the contract deliverable versus necessarily delivering the value that might be in front of us at that moment. And so we also tend to be change adverse. We don't like scope creep, and we have a strict change process because we're still focused on, well, you said you were going to deliver this, and that's what we said in the beginning, and this is what we want in the end. And that's also anti-value. We value responding to change over following a plan because we recognize that no plan is perfect, and plans should account for that. Now, I got a lot I want to say on this one, so I can't stress how important this whole concept is. We go back to the barely sufficient idea with the documentation. So, we need to put a plan together in the beginning, but we only need to do as much as we understand at the moment. And then we plan to replan. Because through an empirical process of, we're going to get working software out there early and often. So we're going to get something out there. We're going to do it. And then we're going to let the users experience it. And then that feedback is going to help us learn, and then we're going to adjust. So it's a very adaptive mindset of put something out there, experience it, learn, and adjust. And that's the empirical process. Because what that's going to do is it's going to help us recognize what the next most valuable thing is. And that's not always going to be what we originally planned. You can plan out all these requirements and things you think are valuable and what you want to do and when you're going to do them. But the moment you put something in the hands of a user that's working and valuable, you're going to get feedback that might very well dictate what the next most valuable thing is. And so we also want to grasp this concept of the last responsible moment. It's a concept from Lean where we put off making decisions until the last responsible moment, because then that gives us the most amount of time and information for which to make the best decisions. And it's not that we're waiting until some critical crunch time moment. No, it's the last responsible moment, because ultimately what we want to do is chase value. And there's no sense in making a decision on something or fleshing out a requirement for something or a design for something that we're not going to do for a while, and where the empirical process might change what we want to do. So this is a huge, huge concept to grasp, that we don't need to know everything up front. What we thought we knew could change, and we have to be willing to change even at the last moment because we want to chase value. Conversely, when our focus is following a plan over responding to change, I think we are more committed to our upfront accuracy than doing the right thing. So this is that I need to know everything up front, create a detailed schedule and a plan, stick to the plan at all costs. Change is a slow or a no, right? We don't like change. It's scope creep. We got to have a change control process. We might not do that because it's going to impact our schedule, and we don't want to impact our schedule, even though we might not be chasing value with that mindset. Probably okay for predictive projects, but for an empirical process where we're going to progressively elaborate and learn from doing and experiencing in the hands of the user, this is detrimental to the Agile mindset. So now we're going to open up the 12 principles behind the Agile Manifesto. Now don't worry, I'm not going to read through all of these, and I don't want you to read through them right now either. Know that you can get to them on the agilemanifesto.org site. What I want to do, though, is call out 3 of them specifically and talk to them in brief. Number 4, business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. Well, a lot of us understand this role of the product owner, where it's the person who is representing the business owner and the organization from a business value perspective, who's working with the development teams to make sure that the highest value items are being done. And this is a role that requires somebody to be available and empowered. And that's sometimes a challenge, especially when we're getting started in Agile. It certainly was a challenge that we faced in DAIP. And we help to mitigate some of that and to help bridge that gap by creating value teams. And I think that's probably a topic for another day. But just know that if you're experiencing this challenge where you don't have somebody accountable, empowered, and available to serve this product owner role, yes, you've got to deal with it, but there's a way to do so. Number 7, working software is the primary measure of progress. See, this is a little bit different measure of success than what you're used to in traditional project management, where you're using project schedules and work breakdowns and percent completes, and you don't really have working software a lot of times in the hands of users until the end. And so our focus now becomes on putting pieces of working software in the hands of users early and often, and that's the only measure of progress. And we've got to learn to put our heads around that concept. And number 10, simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done. So this is probably the least understood and maybe the hardest to explain, but I'm going to try. So we have this concept of the minimum viable product, this MVP, which is going to be, it's going to have core capabilities, whatever you're delivering. It's going to work. It's going to be functional. It's going to deliver the highest value of the capability you're looking at. But it's minimal viable product. It's not going to have all the bells and whistles. It's not going to have all the ancillary features that might make it a perfect product. But then on the other side of the spectrum, we have what we understand as gold plating. Everybody knows that that's where you're going far above and beyond the original intent and scope, and you're doing all the bells and whistles. And so somewhere between MVP and gold plating is a lot of work that might provide some value, but that breadth of work, even in total, probably has less value than the core capability you delivered as the MVP. And so that delta, if we don't do it, is maximizing the amount of work not done, so that we can focus our time and energy on the big chunks of value, the next MVPs of the system. And so we're always chasing value. And this concept also applies to documentation too. We got that idea of barely sufficient, because with documentation, I just want to do enough to explain what I'm looking to do, and I want to do enough to explain what we just did. So let's take a look at the mindset at work. Let's say we have a goal of producing a way to get from here to there faster than walking. Well, in that example at the top, obviously somebody somewhere decided that the solution was a car. And so surely before all this even got started, there were some requirements and design done up front to design this car. And then it may have even been tried to be iterated in an agile way. Maybe it took 4 iterations, let's say, and but the way they went about it is, well, we're going to do a wheel, and then the chassis, and then the body, and then at the end we have a car. And they could say, yeah, we were working from a backlog, and we were doing sprints. We might have even been doing retrospectives. We were doing agile. But the problem is there was not a working product at each iteration. And one of our values is that we need working software, working product, early and often, frequently, so that the users can touch it and feel it, experience it, and learn. And in this situation, there's nothing to show the customer other than an unfinished product. You can't drive it, you can't use it. It certainly doesn't help you get from here to there at all, yet alone faster. Until the very end can they touch it. But that's that was that approach. On the bottom, the team took a quite different approach. They said, well, let's not jump to conclusion on the solution right now, because how do we know that the car is actually going to solve the problem? And so rather than jumping to conclusion, we let the team decide, okay, what's the minimum viable product to meet the goal the way we understand it right now? Let's get something out into the user's hand right away so they can experience it and we can learn something. Because that first iteration, that first 2 iterations even, it's more about learning than it is about getting it perfect and satisfying all of the requirements up front. It's about the revision process, being empirical. And so the minimum viable product here was a skateboard. And it works. It gets you from here to there faster than walking. But we learned from it and said, well, I need more balance. What I really need is something to hold on to. And so that iterated into a scooter. And then I said, well, what I really need to be able to do is I need to be able to go about a quarter of a mile, and there's some rocks and some bumps and things. So I need a smoother ride, something that can get over that, goes a little bit faster. And so we come up with a bicycle. Now at that point, who knows? The end user might say, that satisfies everything I need. I'm done. I don't really need to do anymore. I get there in as quick a time as I need, as smooth of a time as I need. I'm done. Well, if that's the case, we just saved ourselves a lot of time and money by not developing a car, right? So we learned through this process that that's all we needed. And so rather than try to predict every detail up front like the first example and produce something that was overkill, remember the simplicity is the art of maximizing the amount of work not done. Why develop a car if a bicycle serves the need? But even if that didn't completely serve the need, we iterated more and decided I need to go further and faster, and so the motorcycle was created. And then we decided that, through iterations 3 and 4, that we really love that wind blowing through our hair. So yeah, we need some more balance, and I want to feel more relaxed when I'm traveling, but I still like that wind blowing through my hair. And so we still end up with a car, but we end up with a convertible. And it may have taken 5 iterations versus 4 to get to the same idea of a car, but you could certainly say that the convertible makes the customer happier because it included something that they learned along the way that they wanted. And despite the fact that they had something working each and every iteration along the way. So it was a very empirical process. So how does this really envelop the values of Agile? Well, let's walk through those 4 principles from the manifesto. Individuals and interactions. Well, we certainly had a team that was empowered and trusted to deliver a solution. We said, here's our problem, deliver us something that works. And they did. And through collaboration with the client, they continued to iterate on that and produce something, that working software, which is number 2. It was delivered early and often. We delivered minimum viable products, and through progressive elaboration, we got to where we got. Customer collaboration, right, over contract negotiation. Well, we had frequent review and communication, obviously, and ultimately, together, they produced the right work. And we talk about responding to change. This was absolutely an empirical process. It was very adaptive, and we waited to the last responsible moment to make important decisions. In the first example, important decisions were made right up front about the hard top and what kind of steering wheel you were going to use, what kind of seats you were going to have. And at the end of the day, with our bottom example, we don't need the hard top. We might have different seats. We might not have even needed a car in the first place because the bicycle might have been enough. But see, we encompassed all the values of the Agile Manifesto and all the principles that stemmed from it in this example right here. And that's your mindset at work. I use this slide to show that these things are tried and proven. There's nothing new here. The methodologies of Scrum, XP, Lean, Kanban, they've been around a long time. And they continue to evolve. And the things that they're learning in Scrum today, there are some things that are different than what was taught 2 years ago. Because the empirical process is used here too. Okay? Do, experience, learn, and adjust. And the Agile Manifesto, it's been around since 2001. It's remained constant because those values and principles drive everything else. So everything that these frameworks are using, they're using the Agile Manifesto's values and principles as that solid foundation. So this stuff works. So all that said, Agile doesn't fail. We do. We have to understand that we fail to fully embrace the manifesto and its principles. We fail to transform our mindset around how work is done. We fail to properly implement the tried and proven practices, and we fail to commit and persevere. But take heart, success is possible. So the challenge to the entire organization is let's all commit to the Agile mindset. Let's not just try to do the Agile stuff. Let's commit to being Agile and recognize that Agile is a mindset and everything else flows from that. Transformation takes time. You got to be consistent, persistent, and intentional. DAIP has come a long, long way. There's no doubt about it. We've been pushing at this for quite a while, and we're definitely intentional with the approach. We're very persistent and consistent. Every day We're reminding folks of each other of what we need to be thinking, how we need to be thinking, how we need to be working. But we're still far from where we need to be. And so it's a journey and not a sprint, and it's going to take time for you and for the organization as a whole. But if we can commit to that, we can get there. Because if something's going wrong, it's not Agile, it's us, right? So if we are committed to the process, Agile will work for us. But we have to recognize that we need help and seek it. You will need it. Agile concepts are simple, but organizational transformation is not. So I encourage everyone to get Agile training. And many people in our program at DAIP have been to several trainings. Some are certified, and that's gone a long way to give us a good foundational knowledge. Embedded training and experienced Agile leaders in your teams. We have that, and that's been very beneficial for that consistency and that persistence. And then just consider developing an Agile project management office for organizational-wide Agile coaching. I really believe that if we start looking at this seriously from the top down versus our groups pushing from the bottom up, if we have a concerted effort at the top to push coaching down into these teams, I think we can go much further, much faster with changing our cultural mindset and transforming us to an Agile organization. Well, that concludes this digest. I always welcome your feedback, so please email me at the email address on the screen. Thank you.